Welcome, everybody, to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp. And we see Venezuela is on fire, at least parts of it, in this ongoing effort. As sure as the earth circles the sun, the U.S. ruling elite will never stop trying to collapse Venezuela's government in order to slurp up that sweet, sweet oil. And finally, triumphantly be able to yell, see, socialism doesn't work because we do everything we can to collapse their country. So we're yet again seeing this ridiculously redundant, tiresome performance. Act one, Venezuela's far-right opposition forces, with a lot of help from the U.S. propaganda outlets, say that they are going to win the election, right? Before it starts, says we're going to win the election. Act two, if it's clear beforehand that they're just going to get obliterated in the election, they then decide not to run and they say, oh, it's rigged, so we're not going to run. So they then don't run. This time, they thought it would be close enough that they could just claim victory no matter what, both before, during, and after the election. Act three, U.S. propaganda outlets like Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, as well as America's ruling parasites, announced that the opposition in Venezuela has won the election, or that Maduro won, but that there's a lot of irregularities. It's rife with irregularities, they say, because we have far more legitimate elections here in the U.S., right? No, we do not at all, but Venezuela is rife with irregularities. Act five, they do everything possible to sow chaos in the aftermath of an election rife with irregularities that was actually quite the opposite. Behind closed doors, the U.S. gives far-right lunatics in Venezuela money, support, advisory roles, sometimes even arms to help collapse the socialist country. Luckily, there's an easy way to figure out that this election was not rife with irregularities. All you have to do is look at the fact that the U.S. empire, which we know endlessly lies to us, is yelling that this election was rife with irregularities. That's how you know it wasn't. Anytime they repeat something over and over again, you know it ain't true. So let's jump to this. This is Alan McLeod. He's in Venezuela right now. I'll just show a couple of seconds of him reporting on what's going on and what's gone on today.
Those words prompted Edmundo Gonzalez and his supporters to come out into the streets today and vent their fury. Many shops closed early or didn't open at all today, fearing the worst. In certain areas, it's very calm, it's very tranquil. In other areas, it's extremely tense. And in still more, we see thousands of people out on the streets, burning tires, setting fire to different things, even attacking police officers. Nicolas Maduro has warned that the opposition plans a bloodbath and that this could turn into something of a civil war. Mint Press will keep you updated from.
So there's Alan McLeod in Venezuela right now. And my former colleague there, always doing great work. Here is some footage of the ongoing right-wing violence, which has been called for, facilitated by the U.S., but called for by the opposition in Venezuela, because obviously what you should do is, if you've won an election, is just set a lot of things on fire. And I'm not going to play the bullshit propaganda audio of this, but for those of you listening to the podcast, you won't get anything out of this, but they are showing footage of some of the right-wing chaos that has been sown. Now there are many protesters and marchers that are not violent, but there are many that are violent, and not a lot of this is getting reported on. They're reporting that there are protests, but most U.S. outlets are leaving out the fact that the actual violence is being perpetrated by the right wing, by the opposition. And for those of you who didn't see my report yesterday, Nicolas Maduro did win the election. He's the only one who's been declared the victor of the election. He won, was it 52% to 41% or something like that? 40. I have those numbers slightly off, but I'm not that much off. Let's see. It was 54.6% to 42.8% was the final tally there. Like I said, Venezuelan elections are far more legitimate than U.S. elections, where most of the time we vote on imaginary machines that you can never check and never see the code of, and you just push on the screen. You know, you might as well, you could save a lot of time voting in U.S. elections. You just push on your home screen, your laptop, just because it's equally meaningless. Just go up to and go pushing on a screen. I'm not saying that you couldn't have computer voting machine elections. You could. All you'd have to do is have open code, right? All you have to do is code that everyone can see, everyone can test, everyone can see, everyone can hold accountable. That's all you need. But instead of the U.S., it's all top secret, right? Because that's a legitimate system right there. It's top secret voting. The analogy I often use, I've used for years now. And by the way, I've been talking about this since way before Trump decided to make computer voting his thing that he decided upset him. No, this is not a Trump issue. This is actual just democracy issue that goes back decades. But the analogy I like to use is, imagine if in the last 10 minutes, like a really close Super Bowl game, the two football teams, the two teams, whichever you in your mind, you can insert whichever ones are good right now. I don't even know. Are 49ers good? Chiefs, maybe? Two good football teams. It's very close. They're within 3 points of each other. There's 10 minutes left. Man, this is a nail biter. Everyone's into it. And they just shut off all the cameras. They cover up the game. They pull big curtains, cover up the game. They then complete the game without anyone watching. And then the ref sticks his head out or turns on the TV cameras to the nation and says, Chiefs won. That's it. Because I said so. Yeah, no, I saw it. Definitely. People would be, the nation would be on fire. And yeah, that's what we do with our elections. We're just like, yeah, no, it's done in the dark and you can't see it. And it's just whatever they say happened. Obviously. But let's see a little more of the right-wing violence that's going on. It's being filmed from a motorcycle, so it's kind of a little hard to see. But you just see a right-wing mob attacking just like an innocent dude right there. And they're mainly, from all the reports I've heard, they're mainly just attacking people that support Maduro, people that disagree with them politically. This is part of the CIA tactic, the U.S. tactic to create chaos in a nation when they're trying to cause its downfall. Ben Norton's reporting far-right extremists in Venezuela just burned down a hospital. They're also destroying buses and attacking other public institutions. Here's video footage of the hospital burning, the hospital on fire. So, one of the candidates, and look, if you're in Venezuela, you're more than welcome to have complaints about Maduro, things you don't like. I've often said whenever I'm talking about any of these other countries that are not my own, I imagine there are people that disagree with the president. I have never seen a country where there are not people that disagree. But that doesn't change the fact that the opposition wants the U.S. to invade their country. They want the U.S. empire to come in and steal their resources. They are backed by the U.S. empire. Whereas Nicolas Maduro, as he was voting, said free Palestine. The opposition said that Israel's struggle is our struggle, as in Israel's genocide is one that we support. Yay, genocide. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Warm glass of genocide are served up for the opposition in Venezuela. And so there's these key differences. Maduro and the revolution in Venezuela stand up against imperialism, against the privatization, which is the theft of all of the resources of Venezuela, giving it to corporations, mainly Western corporations. And here's the National Lawyers Guild. They were down there. They're down in Venezuela deciding whether it's legit elections. A National Lawyers Guild electoral observers praised the fairness, transparency of Venezuelan election process, condemned the U.S.-backed opposition's refusal to accept the outcome of the democratic election. A delegation of 5 election observers from the National Lawyers Guild monitored the presidential elections in Venezuela that took place on July 28, 2024. The delegation observed a transparent, fair voting process with scrupulous attention to legitimacy, access to the polls, and pluralism. Despite the soundness of the electoral process, the U.S.-backed opposition with support from an anti-Maduro Western press has refused to accept the results, undermining the stability of Venezuela's democracy. The delegation the Lawyers Guild visited several polling sites in Caracas and La Guaira and shared notes and information with the 910 electoral observers present from 95 countries and many organizations, including the Carter Center, the United Nations, the African Union, and the Latin American Council of Electoral Experts. Here's a quote from them, from the president of the National Lawyers Guild. The Venezuelan elections today were not only fair and transparent, but also represented an example of popular civic participation. Their successful outcome is a triumph for the Venezuelan people, especially considering the level of U.S. interference and attempted sabotage of the democratic process, particularly through sanctions and coercive economic measures aimed at producing regime change in Venezuela. So that's the National Lawyers Guild. Someone is bringing up Elon Musk. Elon Musk supports the coup, the right-wing coup of Venezuela. He has never met a right-wing coup that he did not support. He has said notoriously several years ago, well, coup, we want to get used to it. He supported the right-wing coup of Bolivia that they have since undone. And that's where Musk stands. Let's see. Here's and thank you, everybody, for the thumbs up in the comments and everything else. Please throw in a super chat if you feel like it. It always helps support the show. But here's from Manolo de los Santos, who runs the People's Forum in New York City. He said he's down there in Venezuela. He said in the last 24 hours, U.S.-backed far-right mobs have unleashed violence across the country, targeting key locations and burning down voting stations, United Socialist Party headquarters, and the communes where people live, produce, and distribute their food. This has very little to do with fighting for democracy and all about overthrowing Maduro. Despite having no substantiated claims beyond unreliable exit polls, we'll get to those in a second, they claim that 70% of the votes have they claim the far right has won 70% of the votes with zero evidence. This reckless plan to burn down the country relied completely on the non-recognition of election results by the U.S. government and their allies in the region in an attempt to undermine Venezuela and create the scenario for a bloodbath that forces global outcry and condemnation. Whether the far right in Washington succeed in fully destabilizing Venezuela is yet to be seen. The base of Chavismo, which is the movement that supports Maduro, has called for major marches today, which that will surely see millions in the streets defending the election results and calling for peace. So those. Thank you for Took Red Pill over on Rumble for the donation. And yes, Took Red Pill over on Rumble is mentioning the memory of Kevin Zeese and the Venezuelan Embassy Collective. I will be getting to that as well. You're jumping the gun on that one. Kevin Zeese, good friend of mine, an amazing human being, and rest in power, Kevin. But I'll be getting to that in a moment. But let's talk for a moment about these exit polls that show that the opposition won with zero evidence. Well, guess what? They're done by a little outfit called Edison Research. Edison Research is a U.S. government-backed exit poll firm. Okay, it's a polling firm that one of the only remaining polling firms in the United States. They basically do the bidding of the U.S. empire. They consider clients, which means those paying them, to be most of the CIA-created propaganda outlets like Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe. There's several others that they were created by the CIA to create propaganda in other countries. And so Edison Research is funded partially by them. They're also funded largely by NBC, ABC, PBS, and I think CNN. I think those are the maybe CBS as well. But anyway, you get the point. The top 4 or 5 corporate outlets, and they used to be funded by Fox News, but Fox News got upset with some of their exit polls, so the Fox News pulled its funding. So they're funded by the corporate state media outlets here in the United States, CNN, CBS, NBC, etc. And so in our country, they basically do the bidding of the ruling elite to pretend that our elections are actually legitimate and to pretend that the only 2 candidates that actually exist are the 2 corporate gobs of money just spraying into their face holes candidates. And so they pretend those. Anyway, that's what they do in the United States. When they're in another country like Venezuela, Georgia, Iraq, Ukraine, they do exit polling or polling that facilitates U.S. regime change, U.S. proxy war, etc. So that is the only group, firm, polling, etc., that is saying that the opposition won. They're the only ones. A far more legitimate polling firm is, and by the way, Ben Norton did some of this research as well. So big ups to Ben Norton. Oh man, where's the name of the other polling? I'll find it in a second. Here we go. Hinterlasses. Hinterlasses is a far more respected polling firm in the region, and perhaps the most respected polling firm in the region. And guess what? Their exit poll analysis is about what ended up happening. The exit polls aligned with the results because that's what happens in a legitimate election. In exit polls, they said Maduro got 54.6% and Edmundo Gonzalez got 42.8%. And the final results were 51.2% and 44.2%, something like that. But so very close to what the exit polls were showing. By a legitimate firm as opposed to Edison Research. Someone asked about Juan Guaido. Here he is telling you that the opposition won the election because, you know, everyone wants to hear from Juan Guaido. You gotta hear from the fake president saying that someone else is the new fake president.
Gracias por participar, gracias por la expresión de mayoría, gracias por defender la democracia. Ganó Venezuela. Edmundo González Urrutia es electo presidente de Venezuela.
Nothing like hearing the guy who said that he was the president for years and no one believed him. I mean, the U.S. bullied like a few dozen nations into pretending he was the president for a while, but he never actually had any power. So if those countries wanted to deal with Venezuela, if they wanted to deal with them in any way, get a passport, get their citizens to fly from Venezuela back home to their country, like any of those things, they had to go through, guess what? The Maduro government, because Guaido had zero power. But he was given millions upon millions of dollars that was stolen from Venezuela by the United States. So that was nice of him. And then Mexican President AMLO is basically telling everyone who's criticizing the election to shut the fuck up. Mexican President AMLO says, why is the Organization of American States meddling in Venezuelan elections? This is why the OAS doesn't have any credibility. The OAS is this group is this group of nations in Latin America that is basically been captured by the United States. So it's the U.S. puppet regimes, and they always jump in. This is how they facilitated the coup in Bolivia a few years ago. Was OAS jumped in and said, "Oh no, the election is not legitimate," and then New York Times reported it as if the election is not legitimate, and then right-wing forces were able to amass enough power to take over the country. And usually it seems that Venezuela is not able to fall for that kind of thing. It doesn't. The right wing is not able to manifest that kind of power. But thank you, Dan, for the donation. Goddamn right. But I thought now, speaking of Guaido, I thought now would be a good time to, and in case you were wondering, also Elon Musk and Twitter have removed Maduro's official gray X, which for people that are actually, because Elon Musk started selling the blue checks and now the blue checks are meaningless. So, but if you're actually official of a state, you get like a gray something next to your name, gray X or something. And so Maduro had that because he's the president of Venezuela, and they have now removed that. So Twitter would like you to know that Maduro is no longer legitimate, apparently, because he doesn't have the gray X, so that's all that matters. But I thought that would be a good time, speaking of Guaido and this ongoing coup against Venezuela, now would be a good time to look at just a fun little romp through the attempted coups of Venezuela over the years. We've had so much fun with attempted coups in Venezuela, haven't we? So let's start back in. So Chavismo and the revolution came to power in 1998. By 2002, the U.S. was angrily trying to coup them on a regular basis. Here's from Democracy Now! In 2002. April 2002, at around 10 p.m., members of the military high command arrived at the palace in Venezuela to demand Chavez's resignation. Chavez was refusing to sign a resignation, and in response, the generals were threatening to bomb the palace. So in this coup attempt, they're just holding a gun to Chavez's head and saying, you have to resign, but he wouldn't do it. And so this is part of the film. A film crew happened to be there because they were filming Chavez in just making a movie about him, and they happen to be there during this coup. So there's video of some of this, and in one of the quotes in the video, you hear one of the officials say the CIA is behind this. Everyone knows it. We have proof of plans for a coup. Then the filmmaker says at about 3:30 a.m., one of the ministers came out to talk to us. Chavez had decided to hand himself over to the generals to avoid bombing of the palace, but he was still refusing to resign as president. Chavez was led away. 1 hour later, Venezuela awoke to a new regime and an extraordinary TV moment in which it was all revealed. So they kidnap Chavez at gunpoint. This is a CIA-backed attempt. They take him away, so it's kidnapping. And then the palace we had fled only hours before was now the scene of celebrations and backslapping by the coup leaders and their cronies. So the coup leaders are all excited. They've kidnapped Chavez. They've won they've taken over Venezuela. Despite the blackout by Venezuelan private media. So part of the problem during that coup was that corporate media owned almost all the media in Venezuela at the time. So they were able to create a blackout that only allowed propaganda, right-wing propaganda, to come through. But despite that blackout, members of Chavez's government had managed to communicate with international television networks, getting the message back to Venezuela via cable TV that Chavez had not resigned and was being held captive. Very quickly, the word began to spread across the country. Millions of people took to the streets when they found out Chavez had not resigned and had been kidnapped. With so many people in the streets, the palace guard who had remained loyal to Chavez decided to act. Behind Carmona's back, he was the coup leader, a plot had been hatched by Chavez's men to retake the palace. The plan was for the guard to take up key positions, surround the palace, and to wait for a given signal. With all their positions secured, the signal was given and the Presidential Guard moved in. Several members of the newly installed government were taken prisoner, but Carmona and the generals managed to slip away. So that is how Chavez got back into power. The coup only lasted 2 days, and he got back into power. That was the 2002 U.S.-backed coup attempt. Now, ultimately, well, I'm going to bring a little more detail about that coup attempt in a second, but ultimately Chavez dies, I believe, in 2012 from cancer. But for those of you who aren't familiar, it is not that difficult for the CIA to cause cancer in people. They likely did it with Jack Ruby, the man who killed Oswald. He came down with a very quick-acting cancer when he was about to leave prison. And about to start speaking more publicly. It's not impossible to create cancer in people. And anyway, I'll just so now this is from Eva Gollinger, who's a journalist. I spoke to her. I interviewed her once at Redacted Tonight, and she's the one who revealed the actual paperwork showing that the CIA was involved in the 2002 coup against Chavez. She was the one who found that through a FOIA request. Anyway, she says that right here. I was able to find irrefutable evidence using the U.S. Freedom of Information Act that the CIA and other U.S. agencies were behind the coup and supported financially, militarily, and politically those involved. Later on, there were other attempts against Chavez and his government, such as in 2004, when dozens of Colombian paramilitary forces were captured on a farm outside of Caracas that was owned by an anti-Chavez activist, Robert Alonso, just days before they were going to attack the presidential palace and kill Chavez. There was another lesser-known plot against him discovered in New York City during his visit to the UN General Assembly in September 2006. According to information provided by his security services, during standard security reconnaissance of an event where Chavez would address the U.S. public at a local renowned university, high levels of radiation were detected in the chair where he would have sat. So he comes to New York to speak at the UN. He's also going to speak at a university. I don't know which one. The chair that he's expected to sit in is discovered to have very high radiation in it. The radiation was discovered by a Geiger counter that his security brings with them, handheld radiation detection device that the president's security had. In this case, the chair was removed, and subsequent tests showed it was emanating unusual amounts of radiation that could have resulted in significant harm to Chavez had it gone undiscovered. Now, I don't know if you know this, chairs rarely just become radioactive. It's very uncommon that a chair just decides to be radioactive one day. Someone needs to make a chair radioactive. And in order to make a chair radioactive, you'd have to have access to the chair. I mean, there is, I suppose, some possibility that it was like, Dick Cheney sat in that chair beforehand and like ripped a major one that turned the chair radioactive. Totally possible, but fairly unlikely. Not that Dick Cheney would do that, just that he was in that chair right before. So this means someone has to actively be turning a chair radioactive to try and give Chavez cancer. It's also, and obviously if it succeeded, if they weren't checking things with a Geiger counter before he sits in them, if it had succeeded, it's the kind of the perfect assassination because no one sees anyone do anything. He comes down with cancer months later and doesn't know why. And there's really no way you can blame anyone. And anyone who then goes on to blame someone looks like they're making what are you, crazy? Gave him cancer? According to accounts by the presidential security of the event, an individual from the U.S. who had been involved in the logistical support for the event had provided the chair and was shown to be acting with U.S. intelligence agents. So that gives a lot of evidence to the idea, at least, that Chavez could be assassinated with cancer if they had attempted it. Someone had attempted it. Even if you want to say, it wasn't the U.S., it was probably someone else. Someone had attempted it prior to when he got cancer. Some of the pieces that have been coming together, even Gollinger continues, include the discovery of several close aides to Chavez who had private, unobstructed access to him over prolonged periods, who fled the country after his death and are collaborating with the U.S. government. If he were assassinated by some kind of exposure to high levels of radiation or otherwise inoculated or infected by cancer-causing virus, it would have been done by someone with close access to him who he trusted. She then goes through a few of the possibilities. Limzi Salazar was one of Chavez's closest aides for nearly 7 years. He was lieutenant colonel in the Venezuelan Navy. But shockingly, in December 2014, that's after Chavez's death, news reports revealed that Limzi had secretly been flown to the U.S. from Spain, where he was allegedly on vacation with his family. The plane that flew him was said to be from the DEA, and then he was placed into the witness protection program. So Chavez's high-level former aide who was around him all the time, thank you, Kevin, for the donation, who was around him all the time, gets placed into U.S. witness protection program. And I assume is still wandering around the U.S. right now, but his name is Albert Smith. And he has a fake mustache on top of his real mustache. So if it's probably a small town. So, you know, if any of you are in Poughkeepsie or you're in like Toledo, Ohio or something, like look around for an Albert who used to be Chavez's assistant. Okay, so there's some of the possibilities of how Chavez could have been assassinated. But let's move forward a few years to the drone explosion in front of Nicolas Maduro that was also linked back to the U.S. So you can ignore a little bit the CNN propaganda talking, but I'm going to leave the sound on.
It was fireworks first, but it was a drone bomb, a brazen assassination attempt against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The first bid to kill a world leader with commercial drone technology bought online. It could have killed everyone on the stage.
So it fails, obviously, and the U.S. media then does overtime talking about how, oh no, the guy who sent that drone was just a kooky guy who liked to kill presidents and not connected to the U.S. and et cetera, because suddenly U.S. media cared a lot about the origins of this drone bomb, where they don't actually care about most anything that happens in other countries. So, and then of course there was the one I haven't gotten to yet, or one of the ones I haven't gotten to yet, the announcing of Juan Guaido as president of Venezuela. I'm not going to go through all the details. Most of you know them. That, you know, they just, the U.S. and the countries the U.S. is able to bully into it, all announce that Juan Guaido, a man who received 0 votes for president of Venezuela, is now the president of Venezuela. And then all of the U.S. media jumps behind it. Here's New York Times. Back then, they say, who is Venezuela's legitimate president? It's a messy dispute. Oh, is it? A messy dispute? Really? Considering some rando who went to Georgetown. I mean, this guy, Juan Guaido, was completely like raised, fostered as a U.S. asset, went to Georgetown. His like mentor was formerly very high up in ExxonMobil. And it's just like everything about Juan Guaido just reeked of this like U.S. CIA asset. The U.S. then goes on to steal the billions of dollars from Citgo, the Venezuelan gas company, and give it to Juan Guaido and his minions, or give a lot of it to them. So they just cash out. They just become crazy rich. They're supposed to use that money to try and bring down Maduro. During this time, And I told you I'd get back to Kevin Zeese. During this time, there was the occupation of the Venezuelan embassy, the holding of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C., where I lived at the time. And I was a part of that, proud to say. I was there, and, you know, me and many of my friends and awesome people, awesome activists. It was that occupation was spearheaded by Margaret Flowers and Kevin Zeese. Kevin Zeese has since passed away, but they didn't just decide on their own that they would just take over the Venezuelan embassy. They were invited by the government of Venezuela as Americans to hold the Venezuelan embassy for the Venezuelan government of Maduro. The U.S. decided to steal the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C., and claim it belonged to Juan Guaido, even though Juan Guaido was not the president. During that holding of the embassy, it went on for like a month and a half. I can't remember the exact number of days. They cut off the power. They cut off they surrounded the place with loud music and all this shit and bright flashing lights and far right wing, like lunatic, anti-Maduro protesters in America encircled the building and tried to throw things at people, tried to attack supporters of Venezuela's sovereignty. And you could tell they were far right wing. I mean, some of them were shown to have links to Raytheon, etc. But you could tell they were far right wing because their view of a really powerful insult, like that was going to really hurt you, was to yell like the most offensive terms for gay or lesbian. I'm not going to repeat them, but to yell the N word and that is what they viewed as like, oh, I'm going to really get them. I'm going to call them mean names that mean they're gay. What they don't seem to understand, because they're far right-wing lunatics, is that calling someone gay is not an insult. Like, there's gay people in this world, and there's straight people in this world, and there's, heterosexual, homosexual, and I don't view it as an insult anymore. I certainly grew up in that world. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I understand the world they're coming from of, you're gay. But they don't seem to realize that we've advanced. Most of society has advanced past that. So anyway, so it lasted for well over a month. And then the U.S. decided eventually to go into the embassy, which is illegal under international law, and arrest the 4 remaining people there, Kevin Zeese and Margaret Flowers and David Paul and Adrian Pine were the 4 remaining people. Now, many had volunteered to help, but ultimately they decided that because you need resources to exist in a building, it should only be a few people remaining in there. Okay, let's jump to, and they have never given that embassy back to Venezuela. The U.S. has continued to break international law and continues to own Venezuela's embassy in the United States. Let's jump to the Bay of Piglets. This is the last one I'll cover. The last U.S. coup attempt, other than what's going on right now. The Bay of Piglets attempt under Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, there's a bunch of mercenaries, just paid soldiers, some of them U.S. Special Forces, try and invade Venezuela on small crafts, small motorboats, and they're basically stopped by fishermen. I mean, like, fishermen see them and alert, like, the Coast Guard or whatever the Venezuelan equivalent is, and they're stopped rather easily, arrested, put in prison. On Sunday, May 3rd, the government, Nicolas Maduro, announced Venezuela's armed forces had repelled an armed incursion. Operation Gideon was a deeply flawed coup attempt, but what would compel exiled Venezuelans and former U.S. Special Forces to join a plan like this? Well, it was signed off on by Juan Guaido, the U.S. puppet. He actually signed the letter that said, yep, we'll take the money and you can go and destroy the government of Venezuela. And it was led by this maniac, Silver Corps founder Jordan Goudreau, who was supposed to be part of it, but then didn't show up on the day of. I wonder why. I think he knew that it was not going to go well. By the way, his other business, the other business Silvercore does is offering to train like schools with like young kids how to deal with active shooters. So he's making his money by like trying to teach kids to deal with active shooters, and then he's also setting up mercenary invasions of Venezuela, done by Donald Trump and Juan Guaido. All right, I'm going to jump to a few other news stories. Please, everyone, click thumbs up, click subscribe. It's important to subscribe to both my channels because the YouTube channel, even though I'm very active there, I'm not abandoning it, but we never know when it could be banned. It could be banned any day. So please join up at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Subscribe there as well so that there's a backup, both pages. But if you want to support the show a little more than that, you want to throw 38 cents in, 38 fucking cents, then go over to leecamp.net, scroll down to become a subscriber, and you can sign up for $6 a month, which is 38 cents an episode, and you get all kinds of perks and extra stuff. You get my ebook, Dangerous Ideas. You get my comedy special, Laughing All the Way to the Shitstorm. You get a bunch of cool stuff. You also get extra segments regularly. So that's at leecamp.net. Check it out. All right. I got to cover this because it's so ridiculous. Oh, before I do that, let me thank Ivan for the donation. Solidarity, Ivan. Appreciate it. An Israeli diplomat's son ran over a Florida police officer, and he's now having all charges dropped because they say he's going to fight in the IDF. They say serve in the IDF, but that's a propaganda term. You don't serve, you fight, or you shoot things in the IDF. But like literally this guy ran over a police officer in the United States, and because you're going to fight in the IDF, you get no charges. Now imagine if that were not an Israeli headed to the IDF. Imagine if that were a black guy. Imagine if that were an immigrant, like a documented immigrant. Imagine if that were a Latin American who ran over a cop. I think they'd put him in the electric chair or something. But instead, if you're in the IDF, it's okay. But we know you were having a rough day. You know, your Slurpee fell over, like, right before you were like, oh, no. And that, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's not your fault. It's not your fault. All right, another quick news story here. Thank you, Nicholas, for the donation. Solidarity, Nicholas. Just another quick story here. Russia has become the president of the UN, which I feel like this is not getting mentioned much. Russia has just become the president of the UN General Assembly. Security Council. Not General Assembly, Security Council. Now, you may wonder why. Well, it just rotates. The members of the Security Council each become president for a month on a rotating basis. So Russia has just become president of the UN. And I feel like the reason our mainstream media is not really covering this because they don't really want to talk about it. The last time Russia was president was in 2022. Anyway, they're trying to say that there's not a lot that changes with Russia or the United States or anyone else as president. But, of course, this is a BBC article, so the BBC is running with an article of, oh, my God, the maniac is president of the UN. Well, if that's the case, shouldn't you be even more scared when the United States is president of the Security Council? I mean, the U.S. has killed 6 million people in just the war on terror over just the past 20 years. Like, holy God, that's terrifying. That's like putting a Hannibal Lecter in at the president of the Security Council. The United States is cooing countries all over the world. They're trying to do it right now in Venezuela. Like, that is terrifying. The United States has executed and assassinated lots of folks, as Obama says, right? We tortured some folks. We've executed a lot of folks. We've couped a lot of folks. We've executed a lot of folks. Thank you, Nadia, for becoming a member on YouTube. Nadia says, our true history will never be declassified. I hold out some hope. Thank you, Travis, for the donation. Solidarity, Travis. Smedley Butler predicted this. Yes, of course, the great Smedley Butler, the most honored, rewarded Marine that ever existed. But then he changed his way and said, hey, you know, the United States basically just is a corporation with an army, and they use that army to steal things from all around the world. And Smedley Butler toured the country saying that, and did not. He received obviously a lot of fans like you and me, but all of his old allies and comrades, they wanted nothing to do with him. All right, I'm gonna do a little bit of special segment here, tearing apart, destroying Sam Harris again. This is like my third on Sam Harris or something, because we'll get into it. It's just a short clip by him, but in that short clip, he is such a amazing piece of garbage, amazing piece of just sad human sack of shit. If you want my other destroys videos, I've been doing these on various people who are out of their minds. You can go to leecamp.com/destroys with an S at the end. Destroys. But all right, so here's Sam Harris from his podcast again. Most of you know who Sam Harris is. He is he's known for being an atheist, which I'm fine with atheism. But he has shifted into all kinds of other absolute disgustingness.
Of course, Israel has made some terrible mistakes in Gaza.
Yeah, all of it. If his podcast began and ended with that, I would have agreed. That's his whole podcast. Just one sentence. Israel's made some damn awful mistakes and got goodbye.
And the recent killing of aid workers is the latest example. But this is the kind of thing that happens.
He doesn't. Sorry, I know it's going to be a lot of interrupting, but otherwise, if I let him get a full sentence out, I'd be debunking that for 25 minutes alone. So he doesn't, when he says killing of aid workers, he's talking about the World Kitchen that was where they murdered all those aid workers in the World Kitchen cars, or whatever it's called, World something kitchen. He doesn't mention that was not an accident. That was 3 vehicles targeted with World Kitchen, whatever the name of it is, plastered on the top of each car so that it could be seen by planes and drones and anything else that might be above them. And they had been coordinating with Israel's army, the IDF. They had been coordinating with the IDF to make sure they got permission to travel anywhere. So, in fact, they called up and said, hey, is it okay if we travel here in Gaza? And they go, oh, yeah, that's fine. And then they murdered them. They first sent a missile into the first car. The survivors got out, got into the second car. They sent a missile into the second car. The survivors got out, got into a third car. They sent a missile into the third car. And then they were all dead. Job done. So Sam Harris forgets to mention that this was a coordinated attack, not an accident.
But this is the kind of thing that happens in every war.
No, it's actually not. It's so not the type of thing that happens in every war. Yes, there are collateral damage in every war. That part is true. But if you look at the targeting of World Kitchen workers, like one car after another, actually not happening in other world wars. If you look at the actual percentage of children being murdered, 45% of all the murders by Israel have been children. Actually not done in other modern warfare. In other modern warfare, the number of children murdered is like 4 to 8%. 8 is on the high side, where it's like those maniacs aren't at all trying to avoid children, whereas 45% is gunning for children. And what Sam Harris also does not want to tell you is that these snipers are aiming for children. There are children coming into the morgue with double shots in their head, meaning it's not an accident. And in a sniper scope, you can tell that it's a child. It's not tough to figure that out with a sniper scope. And they are shooting them twice in the head. They also, oh God, really debunking him. I got to make sure this segment doesn't end up 45 minutes long. Also, he's not mentioning that we have seen extensive coverage on the AI system that Israel is using to target people in Gaza, to target what they say are Hamas. Now, many of the ones they're targeting are not Hamas, but let's put that aside for a second. When they find someone they believe is Hamas, because the guy owns 3 cell phones, which could be a journalist, could be a lot of things, but whatever, that means must be Hamas. They don't just kill that person when they find them. They wait for that person to walk into their home, and then they bomb the whole home to intentionally kill the family. Intentionally. They watch the guy walk into the home. While he's walking into the home, they could bomb him. But they wait till he gets inside his house or apartment, then they bomb him. Because then they can kill the whole family. And obviously, in the living conditions in Gaza, you often have many generations living together. So it's kind of like, let's obliterate the guy, obliterate his kids, obliterate his cousins, obliterate his uncles, his aunts, his grandmother, his mother. Let's kill them all, because then we don't have that entire family. And you know, this is called something. It's called genocide. It slipped my mind for a minute there, but that's what it is. Yeah. Look up the definition of genocide. Dictionary definition of genocide. So let's go back to Sam Harris saying this happens in all wars.
There are always friendly fire incidents where the good guys wind up killing their own soldiers.
Which is not what we were talking about. We were talking about, he brought up killing of aid workers, which is not your own soldiers. And these aid workers actually got permission to drive where they were driving. Everything he's saying is just utter horseshit, utter garbage. But the key here is he says it in a nice, smooth voice. So it's fine. It's fine. You endorse and celebrate and defend genocide, but you say it in such a way that it sounds like you're talking about your favorite jazz trio. Then it's cool. It's good. Way to go, Sam Harris. Thank you, Nicholas, for the donation. Solidarity. All right, let's keep going with Sam Harris.
To say nothing of innocent non-combatants. Every conflict the U.S. has been in has produced horrors of this kind.
That is true. And rather than say, so that makes it fine, instead he should go, oh, so if Israel's committing a genocide right now and the U.S. does this too, maybe the U.S. is awful too. What? Oh, Sam, would you have to use 2 brain cells to figure that out? 2 whole brain cells? But of course, he's also ignoring the fact that, and the U.S. empire's wars, killing 6 million over the course of 20 years with the global war on terror. The estimates, according to the Brown University cost of war, are 4.5 to 6 million people murdered in these areas. Now, that's taking into account indirect deaths. So when you blow up a water facility and people die of diseases because they don't have clean water, that counts. But if you look at just direct deaths, it's about 1 million, where literally just bomb landing on guy's head. Rather than Sam Harris use that as a legitimacy for the U.S. does it, so it's okay for Israel to do it. It should be the reverse. It should be Israel's horrific. The U.S. does it. The U.S. is also horrific. See how he spun those on their head? Thank you, Didoria, for the donation. But he says it like it's, look, guys, we're always bombing kids. We're blowing up weddings. It's cool, man.
We bombed weddings and funerals.
See, now, if you take that clip and you make that his entire podcast, again, I would agree. Just welcome to Sam Harris Hour. We bombed weddings and funerals. Goodbye, everybody. Then I would totally agree.
In Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember Pat Tillman? We killed our own celebrity football player. Killing anyone.
This is so stupid. This is like a Mad Libs. Could you, like, is there anyone else in the world right now who's like, looks at Israel killing 40,000 people? Those are direct deaths, not the indirect deaths, which are over 200,000. Does anyone else in the world right now, I mean, maybe some IDF generals, but is anyone else in the world right now looking at 40,000 people dead, 70% of them women and children? They see that and they go, yeah, but we shot Pat Tillman. So it's kind of the same, right? It's kind of the same, right? Because, yeah, Israel killed the 30,000 children, but our guys shot Pat Tillman. So, I mean, what? It's very same thing. It's like, you know, and Pat Tillman was like a really cool guy. So it's like, he's like 30,000 people.
Anyone but the bad guys amounts to an act of spectacular self-harm, especially for Israel, which is held up to greater scrutiny and to higher standards than any other nation.
Sorry, I kept interrupting that, but that's one of the dumbest sentences I think I've ever heard in my life. Israel's had to more scrutiny than any nation. Israel has done massive propaganda efforts to actually make sure they're not held to the same scrutiny of other nations. You're telling me if other nations, if African nations, if Latin American nations were murdering 40,000 fucking people, 70% women and children, they wouldn't be held to scrutiny? But Israel has until this point has been held to almost zero scrutiny. In the Great March of Return, what was that, 2018? In the Great March of Return, you had thousands of unarmed Gazans walking up to the border fence and many of them getting shot. Israel killed well over 100 people. They shot like 1,000 people with snipers shooting women, children, people holding white flags, medics, press, with snipers shooting them. And that wasn't even during this so-called war. It's not a war, it's genocide, but during this so-called war, that was during people marching towards a border fence. Israel murdered all those people and was held to pretty little scrutiny. Like, he is unbelievable.
And under conditions that are objectively more challenging than any other nation has ever faced.
Okay, let's ignore the idea that nobody's ever faced a challenge except Israel. It's another dumb statement. But, yeah, Israel is in a challenging position right now. God, that I totally agree with him on that. They are in a challenging position. Let's analyze maybe why that is. Is it because they're a apartheid state? Is it because they're committing genocide right now? Is it because they stole all their land not that long ago? Thank you, James, for the donation. Solidarity. Thank you, Nicholas. Hey, how about this? Everyone who hates Sam Harris, throw in a $2 or more super chat. I'm taking a poll on how many people dislike Sam Harris. If you dislike him, throw $2 into the super chat. Boy, that's a new tag. I'm using that tag. That's my new unofficial poll. But he goes, Israel's has so much difficulty right there, really difficult circumstances. It's because they're a fucking oppressive apartheid state. It's because they came in the late 40s, 50s, stole everyone's land. The first Nakba was a mass ethnic cleansing, killing of many say 700,000. The estimates, it's tough to know with records those times, but it was hundreds of thousands. All right. Ivan hates Sam Harris. Hundreds of thousands. They steal the land. They continue to steal the land. They're voted into existence by the UN with a vote of 33 nations. 33 nations, many of them who were browbeat and pressured by the United States and other countries. But 33 nations out of the 200 in the world voted them into existence, because at that time the UN only had something like 52. But all of this is why Israel has a tough time, right? That's why Israel's having a tough time right now, is because they're a brutal apartheid state.
Now, hopefully, Israel is busy learning whatever lessons it can learn to make fewer tragic mistakes.
Like, don't genocide? You mean that lesson?
But none of its mistakes, however terrible, suggest that Israel is on the wrong side of this conflict.
What? Everything suggests it's on the wrong side of the conflict. There is nothing that doesn't suggest it's not on the wrong side. Holy God. Honestly, this is equivalent to during World War II being like, sure, there's the Holocaust. Sure, things are rough for Germany, but nothing suggests that they're on the wrong side, that the Nazis are on the wrong side of this conflict. Yeah, it actually does. It all very much does.
Or that they should stop fighting before destroying Hamas.
First of all, even generals, many in Israel's military say destroying Hamas is not even possible. It's not even a possibility. But on top of that, we know Israel's not just destroying Hamas. They created Hamas. They helped fund Hamas. They knew about October 7th for a year in advance, according to the New York motherfucking Times. Everyone knows they knew about October 7th, and yet they let it happen anyway. So they're not actually trying to stop Hamas. They're trying to genocide everyone in Gaza. That's their aim. And part of blowing up all the hospitals was to try and make disease run rampant through Gaza, and then they could claim it wasn't them killing all the people. Well, guess what's now running rampant in Gaza? Polio. Polio is now in Gaza as well. Yes, Nadia mentions that Stalin later said he regretted the UN vote. That is true.
They're fighting an urban war against a terrorist regime that is doing everything within its power to maximize the loss of civilian life.
No, that's not true at all. Okay, so first of all, if you call Hamas a terrorist regime, you have to, of course, call Israel a terrorist regime, right? Hamas on October 7th came in, kidnapped hundreds of people, and shot many people, although many of the 1,200 that were murdered by the IDF. But that's nothing compared to what Israel does. So Israel's absolutely a terrorist organization. And let me just remind everyone that prior to October 7th, before October 7th, Israel had 5,000 Palestinian hostages in prisons. So Israel was the one holding all the hostages before October 7th. Now, since October 7th, they've stolen, kidnapped another, numbers are tough to come by, but probably 5,000 people. So they now have like 10,000 hostages in Israeli prisons. It's interesting. Sam Harris has no interest in freeing those hostages. I wonder why that is.
On its own side.
And he says all this bullshit about, they're trying to maximize civilian death. No, they're not. They created tunnels because it was the only way to operate unsurveilled in an open air prison. All of this comes back. He wants you to have like a goldfish memory, and you think that Gaza just popped up out of the blue yesterday, and Israel all of this history started yesterday. No, in fact, these are people put into a prison. Yes, an open air prison, but it's still a prison. They can't leave or come in or out. They can't get medical supplies. They can't often get the food they want. They can't get construction supplies so they can rebuild their buildings, et cetera, technology, et cetera. So they're prisoners, and yeah, they found ways to operate. They found out that if they created tunnels, guess what? They couldn't be surveilled as easily by Israel. If any of us were prisoners, is that not what we would do? Are there any of you, please raise your hand if you're out there, and if you were a prisoner locked in a, few square mile area, you wouldn't find the way to live that was outside of the view of your captors. It's so stupid.
Okay, the lengths to which Hamas has gone to ensure civilian casualties is unprecedented. Again,
It's, the mental gymnastics to put forth this garbage is unbelievable.
On its own side.
Yeah, that's right. Because Hamas, because you know what Hamas did is they're actually the ones that programmed the AI program. I believe it's called Lavender. Fuck Lavender. I believe it's called Lavender. They're actually the ones that program the AI system that Israel uses to blow up whole families. Yeah, that was Hamas. Yeah. Hamas, they totally they set the coordinates that got Israel to blow up all the hospitals. Besides the fact that we've never actually seen any control rooms underneath hospitals, right? We were all going to see these amazing Hamas control rooms under all the hospitals and everything. Boy, it's interesting. We haven't seen any of that. We haven't. Yeah, the most they could come up with was like when CNN got a camera in there, they showed a calendar written in Arabic on the wall. That certainly shows that's a control center, command center in the hospital. And of course, one of the biggest just executions of hundreds of people happened. So with guns and not missiles happened at was it Al Shifa Hospital? One of the hospitals, but basically, many. So something you need to understand here, which again Sam Harris does not want you to know, is Hamas is also the government of Gaza, right? So that means it's not just militants. If you're going to have a government, right, the U.S. has our military, and we have a lot of government officials who are not military. Now, it's the same with Hamas. That, yeah, there are Hamas militants. There are also people in Hamas who deal with healthcare and deal with garbage pickup and other shit. So they came to get paid, and one of the only facilities that hadn't been destroyed where they could get their pay. Now, I imagine there's very little pay to go around, but one of the only areas that they could show up that hadn't been destroyed was Al Shifa Hospital. And so they show up for that, and then the IDF comes in and basically executes them all. First they bomb it, and then they take the survivors and they shoot all the survivors. So Acoma 714 donated on Rumble. Solidarity. All right. I think we're getting kind of close to the end.
Linger over this detail for a second. This gets my vote for the most perverse behavior in human history.
I think Sam Harris gets my vote for the most perverse mental gymnastics in human history. What a disgusting human being. The ability to do these, like, to act like this faux intellectual. I'm going to somehow make it logical to commit genocide. I'm going to make it rational to commit genocide. And he's honestly trying harder to justify it than the Israelis are, than like Netanyahu and the generals. Because they say things like, oh, they're all termites, kill them all. They say things like, no babies are innocent. No Palestinians innocent, even the babies. They say things like, we just want to clear Gaza. They're not doing a lot of the mental gymnastics. Sam Harris is just about, he is one of the only guys I've seen who's like, no, I'm going to sit here and try and intellectualize the idea that genocide is fine, the idea that blowing up babies is fine, the idea that murdering 40,000 innocent people is fine. I'm going to sit here and tell you why it's rational, it's logical, it's sophisticated, it's evolved, it's mature, it's the adult thing to do, is just murder thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Real mature, real adult, real intellectual, this guy. It's funny because he's like got that kind of book smart speak, but he's clearly got like a really base animal brain, like the ape on the savannah that was like the slower ape. They kind of, you know, the other apes were like, just leave him over by the tree. He doesn't. I know he doesn't get it. Just move on. It's just like a real troglodyte, basic level, animalistic lizard brain, but he has a good vocabulary. It's good to know that people with good vocabulary can be lunatics or sociopaths.
And the college students and the TikTok zombies can't see the asymmetry here.
Now, many people across this world right now are talking about the asymmetry going on in the Gaza-Israel conflict. The asymmetry, right? These are people who are probably not calling, many are not calling it a genocide, not calling it ethnic cleansing, but they're saying, but it is asymmetrical. Like Israel's killing too many people. That's what they say. It's asymmetrical warfare. It's not really fair. Sam Harris is so unhinged. He's saying it's asymmetrical the other way. He's saying it's asymmetry because Hamas has such an upper hand that Israel's just doing the best they can. They're trying so hard. They're trying so hard to do the best they can. Here, let's see. We can get Sam Harris's take on this, and maybe I'll wrap up with this. Let's get Sam Harris's take. You know, because Israel's they're so ethical and they're trying so hard. And they really want to protect people. And here's Rashida Tlaib pointing out that yesterday, the government of Israel was debating whether it was okay to rape Palestinians. This is not a joke. This is the Knesset, and part of their proceedings were shown on video. And they were debating whether it's okay to insert a stick in a prisoner's rectum, whether that's legitimate. Debating whether it's okay to rape Palestinians. That's what's going on in the Israeli government right now. That's how morally repulsive they've gotten. And I'm sure Sam Harris will have a good defense of that as to why it's Hamas's fault, actually, that they got torture raped. It's their fault. They really did that. It's just so morally repulsive. I mean, it is. Sam Harris is trying to get you to believe in an upside down moral universe, an absolutely inverted moral universe, and it is unbelievably repulsive. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, he is one of the things he got known for was defending atheism, talking about atheism. And one of the things that's put forward as a debate against atheists, and I'm atheist. I'm a secular Jew. So I call it atheist by choice, Jewish by birth, but it's really, I guess, Jewish by culture to some degree. But anyway, one of the things that's used to attack atheists is, in atheism, there's no morality because God isn't telling you what to do, right? With atheism, you could just murder someone because God wouldn't say that's bad or whatever. And it's a dumb argument. It's really stupid. You should if the only reason you're not murdering someone is because a guy in the sky or a book you read told you not to, then that's a real problematic. Like you should have a deeper moral understanding rather than just, you might go to a fiery place down below one day. So it's a dumb argument. But ironically, Sam Harris right here is proving it right. He's an atheist, and clearly he has zero morality, like zero ethics, zero understanding of human worth to defend a genocide. So he really is not making atheists look good right now. And, you know, I do not like to see it, but he's really hurting the atheist cause. All right. I don't know about you, but I can't take any more Sam Harris. So I'm going to wrap up today's live stream. I gave you a lot of extra time there. So I hope you will reward it by joining up at leecamp.net if you feel you got $6 worth. I mean, 38 cents worth, because 38 cents an episode, $6 a month. Join up leecamp.net, scroll down to become a subscriber. And I will see you tomorrow for Government Secrets. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern on my YouTube channel. But for more dangerous ideas, I will be back Thursday and Friday. I do these 4 days a week. So, and I'm going to have a bunch of missed days coming up because I am traveling to see family. But I will be here Thursday and Friday. So join you then. And thanks a lot, everybody at Locals. Honestly, you make this show possible. You guys are goddamn heroes. Truly can't do it without you. And Venezuela, hang in there. You can beat this latest U.S.-backed coup attempt. See you tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. Keep fighting.